All right. What else do you see in the pattern of the language? Very obvious. Repetition. Thank you. So you have repetition. Okay? So you have it was. And then you also get into the we had. And then you get into the, and I'm doing it in 3 different ways, but you don't have to. We were. Okay? All those things, and we're looking at some advanced syntax techniques, are called an anaphora. So, looking at what we just underlined or squiggled or boxed, what can you guess an anaphora is? That's what the example is, but what is the definition? What is an anaphora? What would you guess? Yeah, so it is the repetition of the beginning word or words at the start of a phrase or sentence. And the purpose of this anaphora, we see, is to show contrasts, right? So this can be labeled multiple things. An anaphora, parallelism. It's also a juxtaposition because the sentence structure is showing the opposite in each phrase. All right? All right, so let's look. It was the best of times for whom? The rich, yep. It was the worst of times for whom? The poor. So one of the things that you'll find throughout A Tale of Two Cities is you'll find doubles or the duality of a situation or character. So Dickens is not saying it was the best of times in one place and it was the worst of times in others. He was saying at the same time we have the best and the worst. Where do we see the best? In the elite, right? In the aristocracy. And we see the worst of the times for everybody else. Next, it was the age of wisdom. And it was the age of foolishness. Okay, how can we have both during this time period? Mid-1700s. Mid to late 1700s. Why do we have wisdom? Wisdom of what? Yeah, so it's the time where we're starting to understand more about science, about how things work. Why do we also have foolishness? How can we have wisdom but at the same time be foolish?
Those who don't want to progress with the enlightenment.
Yeah, so you're foolish because you could have those who don't agree, right? Those who don't want to agree. It was the epoch of belief, and it was the epoch of incredulity. Epoch being time period. So we know what belief is. If we know that we are contrasting, what can you guess incredulity means? Yeah, it's a time of being unable to believe. So again, I think this goes back to the idea of believing in science and even philosophy, but at the same time not being able to believe it because you don't understand. Or because you don't have the means to understand. If you're talking the lower class was not the ones that were leading the Enlightenment. Okay? You also have the season of light, and notice light is capitalized. And you have the season of darkness. Notice darkness is capitalized. Okay? Light is in reference to what? I mean, what have we been talking about? The Enlightenment. And what was the Enlightenment movement? What was it about? Have y'all gotten there yet? Just starting to get there?
I wanted people to be like equal.
Okay, so we're moving from this idea of the Enlightenment is about rational thought. This is where you have a big movement of philosophers. It's a move away from, and think the idea of like what we saw in Julius Caesar. We're moving away from the idea of things happen because the gods allowed them to, right? Or anything that we couldn't understand or explain, it was attributed to the gods. It was the gods that deemed this necessary, right? So that's kind of the movement in the Enlightenment period. What is the season of darkness? Why can we be enlightened but still be dark? Because we're just coming out of, you could talk about the Dark Ages, you could talk about we're coming out of the Middle Ages. What else can it be a season of darkness? What else is happening? Well, the poor are happening. War. Oh, war. Yes. War with whom? Well, I mean, when we're talking about him writing it during 1859, we're looking at the mid-1700s. Yeah, so we're looking at the age, the season of darkness is the French Revolution is coming, right? And that's ultimately what our book is leading up to, is that it's the build-up of the revolution. Okay? Then we move to the spring of hope. And the winter of despair. And again, how can we have both? So I think it goes back to what we've been saying before, right? The spring of hope, that we have this idea that there will be a change in both the caste system, right? Is it CASTE, right? The caste system. We hope that there'll be change economically. But the winter of despair, where it's the reality, is that there's not a whole lot changing. Not quickly enough. And notice all of these are the it was notice after that we switch to we. So now we're switching over to first person. So we had everything before us. We had nothing before us. So how do we have both? Again, you're looking at the doubles. How do we have both? Who has everything? The rich. Who has nothing? The poor. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. I love that. We're not saying hell. Can't say hell, because if we say hell, then that's a real thing. So we can talk about heaven. We just won't talk about that other place that's down there somewhere that we might go. But then notice, in short, the period was so far like the present period. Okay, so let's figure out what is he talking about. What period are we talking about here, and what is the present period? The period is what? Yeah. 1757 to 1794. The present period is the time that he's writing it in. The present period, this is the whole foundation of why he's writing this. The present period was so far, or the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree, superlative being top, of comparison only. So we're just saying we're comparing these. It's not really happening. We're just kind of saying that, like, look. So the most outspoken people are saying, we kind of compare, but there's nothing really to look at. Dickens is saying, look at what's happening there and what has happened there. The same strife and the same conditions are bubbling up in England right now. Okay? That, my friends, is one sentence of Dickens. Yay! All right. So, open up your book. We have one more paragraph to read today. And we're going to continue to look at the comparison between the two.
There were a king with a large jaw and a queen with a plain face on the throne of England. There were a king with a large jaw and a queen with a fair face on the throne of France. In both countries, it was clearer than crystal to the lords of the state preserves of loaves and fishes that things in general were settled forever.
All right. So, let's go to our chart. Crap, I don't have a chart. Yes, I do. Let me use my old one. All right. So notice you have London and England. Who is on the throne in England? Anne. Okay. So you have the king with the large jaw and the queen with the plain face is in England. That is George III and Charlotte Sophia. How do I know all this? Because I looked at that Stanford website and looked at the history. In Paris, France, you have the king of the large jaw and the queen with the fair face. So that is Louis XVI, King Louis XVI, and Marie Antoinette. King George III. And what we find out about him is that he gives away his rights to the crown because he begins to become a little mentally unstable. So he has mental instability and transfers power to his son. until he dies, until George III dies, and then the son takes over. You have Charlotte Sophia, and then the Queen of France, the queen with the fair face, is Marie Antoinette, and the king is King Louis XVI. So notice, even in his language, he's trying to show you that we are the same.